Hi, shalom. Quick content warning. This video includes mentions of religious abuse, purity culture, and childhood sexual abuse. Viewer discretion is advised. All right, so today we're going to talk about Josh Duggar and the rest of his family. This is going to be a little different because it's actually going to be in two parts. So far in this series, I have focused on particular public figures with problematic ideologies. We'll be getting to that once I actually start talking about Josh Duggar and the rest of his family. But there is a whole sinister backstory behind their beliefs and the shit that went down with Josh Duggar, and that's what I'll be digging into in this video. So in order to understand the Duggars, we have to go back to the origins of a specific strand of Christian fundamentalism called the Quiverfull movement. There's some overlap with other fundy sects, but there's also some important differences. In churches that could be considered more mainstream, using birth control and having more average numbers of kids is not unusual. The mother might work outside the home in some capacity. The kids might go to public school. Obviously, there are many aspects of that lifestyle that I would deem conservative by my standards today, but there's still a lot about it that could be considered normal and potentially a bit less problematic. Kids in public and private schools can have decent social lives and play sports and all that kind of stuff. The best analogy I can think of is mainstream Mormonism versus the FLDS, or Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints. I might not agree with Mormon theology, but that doesn't mean it's the same thing as the FLDS. Now, the Quiverfull movement is vastly different from what could be called mainstream American evangelicalism. The word quiverfull comes from a verse in Psalms that refers to children as arrows, and the rest of the verse reads, "Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them." A quiver is the case that you put arrows in. Most Christians don't learn Hebrew. Many Jews know at least a little bit, and I feel pretty confident in saying that that is not what this means. Quiverfull parents generally don't believe in using birth control, even in situations where it could have medical benefits. Therefore, many of these families are ridiculously large. The Duggar parents have at least 17 kids. I forget how many there are now, but it's a shit ton of kids. There are so many things about this that are super problematic, so we'll be coming back to that. There are a lot of things that set the Quiverfull movement apart. A big one is how they make less extremes form of evangelicalism look almost liberal. It's not unusual for Christian mothers to work outside the home at least part-time, either because they want to or financial circumstances or a little of both. It's generally considered the family's choice of what works best for them. In Quiverfull families, the mother is home regardless of the financial circumstances, and the kids are almost always homeschooled. So between having a one-parent income and having lots of kids, many of these families live in extreme poverty, and any kind of public assistance is demonized. The homeschooling component is particularly problematic. As I've said before, teachers in either public or private schools are mandatory reporters, meaning they are required by law to report any overt signs or suspicions of child abuse to the proper authorities. Now, there are plenty of sane reasons to homeschool kids. If your kid is disabled or struggles academically, etc., homeschooling can be a positive experience. But in the Quiverfull movement, parents keep their kids out of school to minimize their contact with mandatory reporters. Now, this is a big problem because these families tend to believe in extreme corporal punishment. Doctors are also mandatory reporters, and many of these families don't believe in taking their kids to the doctor. So the kids' contact with people who could help them is extremely limited. Another facet of this issue is that many of these families do home births so they don't have to get birth certificates or other identification for their children. So the government might not even be aware that these children exist. I have heard of cases where homeschool survivors have had to take their parents to court to get access to their legal documents. So to go back to homeschooling, the other thing that can happen with these kids is called educational neglect, meaning that the kids are not being adequately educated or prepared for adulthood. It's not unheard of for parents to skip math and science for girls, the rationale being that they won't need those things as wives and mothers. Now, don't get me wrong, as someone with dyscalculia, math was torture, and I have a lot of strong opinions about how it should be taught, but the solution is not skipping out on it altogether. These mothers get it in their heads that they can effectively homeschool like 5 different grade levels without any detrimental effects. Homeschooling younger grades is one thing, but I could barely do high school math when I was in high school, so there's no way I'd be able to teach it. Older kids are often left to educate themselves so the parents can give the younger kids more attention. Quiverfull parents generally don't believe in higher education, so they might not provide a proper transcript for teenagers or otherwise prevent them from going to college. It's not good, to say the least. Now, the Quiverfull movement didn't always look the way it does now. The Duggar family brought it into the mainstream, but like I said, there is a whole backstory here. One of the most common misconceptions about this movement is that it's new. It's not. It goes back to the 50s, and it was started by a guy named Bill Gothard. He believed that American values and family values were under attack, which is ridiculous when you think about it, because I don't know a single healthy parent who has an issue with the idea of supporting parents and helping them raise healthy, well-adjusted children. But in the Quiverfull world, it's a very linear definition. Family values is typically code for straight, white parents who are anti-choice and anti-queer. But all of this started before the shifts in political conservatism that started in the 80s. It didn't start out as a political movement per se. It was more of a cultural one, if that makes sense. During World War II, women had to take on jobs that historically they had never done because there weren't as many men around to do them. Society learned that women are just as capable of doing all those things as men are. That shifted with the end of the war. The attitude was like, okay, ladies, you had your fun. The men are back from the war, so now it's back into the home for you. Not surprisingly, not all women wanted to be exclusively in the home. And this is the kind of thing that Bill Gothard took as an attack on this ideology. Bill Gothard started a curriculum called ATI, or the Advanced Training Institute. There is so much to unpack here. This is a multifaceted curriculum that covers everything from homeschooling to courtship for young adults, which brings me to another big difference between Quiverfull and mainstream Christianity: courtship. I'm going to call that what it is: bordering on arranged marriages. Any physical expressions of affection are a huge no-no. Teenagers are generally not allowed to choose their own partner. Some parents push their children to get married or at least engaged as young as 16. This is mind-blowing to me when I think about how I was at 16. I wasn't even ready to date back then. There was no way in hell I would be ready to get married. Another facet of this courtship thing is a concept called purity culture. Purity culture centers around the idea of abstaining from any form of sexual activity until after marriage. That in itself isn't always a bad thing. Waiting until marriage or serious relationship commitment is, I think, more common than people realize. Even before I became a Christian as a teenager, I abstained out of practicality. I didn't want to take the chance of becoming pregnant or getting an STD, but that's a personal choice, not an ideology that is forced on you. In this ideology, women who have engaged in any physical intimacy are considered damaged goods, and men can also be let off the hook because the women are sometimes blamed for tempting the men. I have nothing to say about that. Okay, let me rephrase. I have nothing nice to say about that. That brings us to the issue of sex education. Quiverfull parents generally homeschool and don't provide well-rounded sex education. I have nothing against homeschooling, but when it's used to keep your kids off the grid and indoctrinate them, it's much more problematic. These parents carefully curate the information their children receive about sex. Words like rape, assault, and consent are typically not used. So if unfortunate things happen, a child might not have the necessary words to communicate it to their parents or caregivers. Now, I have so much beef with the idea that this crap only happens in the Catholic Church. This happens in lots of religions. Another problem is that these kids are typically given abstinence-only sex ed if they are given any information at all. I've talked to Quiverfull survivors who were in their mid-teens or older when they learned where babies come from, and I am not making that up. Don't get me wrong, I don't think teenagers going around having sex goes anywhere good. I do think it needs to be emphasized that only abstinence is 100% effective, but it also needs to include reproductive biology, effective communication, and information on the risks and benefits of different types of birth control. All right, I think I'm going to stop this video here. There's a lot of great information about this movement that goes into greater detail, and I'll post all of that info down below. In part 2, I'll go into more details specifically about the Duggar family. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Lahitra Oat. Bye!